My name is Sarah Mitchell. At 33, I had built what I believed was a stable life. Teaching third graders at Oak Ridge Elementary in Boston gave me purpose, structure, and the satisfaction of shaping young minds. My students' bright faces greeted me each morning, their eagerness to learn making even the most challenging days worthwhile. I thought my relationship with Jason was equally solid, a foundation I could build the rest of my life upon. That was before I heard those 4 words that changed everything. Standing alone under the neon glow of the Hamilton Plaza Hotel, I replayed her words in my head. "You can't expect me to be loyal. I'm young, I'm hot, and I have options." The voice of Jason's coworker, Melissa, echoed in my mind, her smug tone cutting through me like a knife. What I did next turned her options into her biggest regret. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Jason Carter entered my life on a balmy June evening in 2019. The charity gala for Boston Children's Hospital transformed the grand ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton into a sea of elegant black ties and flowing gowns. I'd been dragged there by my best friend Emily, who insisted I needed to get out more after my previous relationship had ended 6 months earlier. "You can't keep hiding behind those lesson plans forever," Emily had said, adjusting the straps of my borrowed dress. "Trust me, there's life beyond your classroom." I was at the bar, fumbling with my clutch, when a deep voice beside me ordered a scotch. "Neat?" "And whatever the lady is having," he added, flashing a smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes in a way that immediately disarmed me. Jason was charming in that effortless way some men are. Tall with dark hair that had just the right amount of salt at the temples, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit that suggested success without shouting it. His business card read, "Marketing Director, Meridian Solutions," and his conversation was equally polished. By the end of the night, he had my number and a promise for dinner the following weekend. Our relationship progressed with the comfortable ease of something meant to be. After a year together, we celebrated at the Blue Oak Bistro, a small, intimate restaurant overlooking the harbor. Jason raised his glass, the candlelight reflecting in his hazel eyes. "To us," he toasted, "and to many more years together." I believed him completely. My parents adored Jason from the moment they met him at Thanksgiving dinner that first year. My mother pulled me aside as we cleared the dishes. "That man looks at you the way your father still looks at me after 40 years, she whispered, squeezing my hand. "You two are perfect together." Even my father, typically reserved in his judgments, clapped Jason on the shoulder as they discussed the Patriots season on the porch, cigar smoke curling around them in the crisp autumn air. "He's a good one, Sarah," Dad told me later. "Smart, respectful, and he clearly adores you." Only Emily, my best friend since college and a pediatric nurse with an uncanny ability to read people, seemed hesitant. "He's charming," she conceded over coffee one Sunday morning about 8 months into our relationship, "but sometimes I wonder if he's a little too charming." "What does that even mean?" I laughed, stirring another sugar into my latte. Emily's expression remained serious. "I've seen how he works the room at parties. Sarah, how his attention shifts when someone new walks in, the way he flirts with the waitress when you're in the bathroom." "That's just Jason being friendly," I insisted, though something cold settled in my stomach. Emily simply nodded, letting it drop. "I hope you're right. I just want you to be happy." Looking back, I should have paid more attention to Emily's concerns. The red flags were there, fluttering at the edges of my happiness, but I chose to ignore them. The late-night texts that he quickly dismissed as just work stuff, though the timestamps showed they arrived long after any reasonable business hours. The unexplained credit card charges at upscale bars on nights he claimed to be working late. The way his phone was suddenly password protected after years of openness between us. "You're imagining things," he told me one night when I finally gathered the courage to confront him. It was January, a particularly brutal winter storm raging outside our apartment. His voice was calm, reasonable, making me question my own instincts. "This project is huge for my career. Sarah, I need you to trust me." And I did trust him. Even when my intuition screamed otherwise, I trusted him when he suggested we open a joint account for our planned trip to Portugal, a dream vacation we'd been discussing for months. I contributed religiously to that account, watching it grow to over $3,000. Then came the day I tried to check the balance and discovered the password had been changed. Just a security measure, Jason explained smoothly. There have been some phishing attempts at the bank. I'll update you with the new password tomorrow. Tomorrow never came. Neither did an explanation for the dwindling balance I eventually discovered when I went to the bank in person, stomach churning with dread. But the final straw, the moment that shattered any remaining illusions, came on Valentine's Day, 2024. Jason had made reservations at the Willowbrook Estate, an exclusive restaurant nestled in the countryside just outside Boston. The setting was breathtaking, a historic mansion surrounded by snow-covered gardens, each table in the converted ballroom set with fine china and crystal that gleamed under grand chandeliers. I'd spent hours getting ready, choosing a deep burgundy dress that Jason had once said brought out the amber flecks in my eyes. My hair was swept up in an elegant twist, a few tendrils framing my face. As I applied a final touch of lipstick, I allowed myself to hope that perhaps this romantic setting was chosen for a special reason, maybe even a proposal. The evening started perfectly. Jason was attentive, charming, holding my hand across the table as we savored each exquisite course. When dessert arrived, he stood suddenly, champagne glass in hand. My heart fluttered as conversations around us quieted and all eyes turned to our table. "I'd like to make a toast," Jason announced, his voice carrying through the hushed room. His gaze, however, wasn't directed at me but at a nearby table where a stunning young woman sat with what appeared to be colleagues. "To my beautiful future options," he continued, raising his glass toward her. The woman, Melissa, as I would later learn, giggled and raised her glass in return, her eyes locking with Jason's in a way that made it instantly clear they shared more than a professional relationship. The room seemed to tilt around me. Blood rushed to my face as scattered laughter and whispers filled the air. I sat frozen, champagne untouched, as Jason resumed his seat with a casual smile, as if he hadn't just humiliated me in front of a restaurant full of people. "What was that?" I managed to whisper, my voice trembling. He shrugged, taking a bite of chocolate soufflé. "Just being friendly with the new team member. Melissa joined marketing last month." "Jason, please don't do this," I said, my voice barely audible above the renewed conversations around us. He glanced up, annoyed. "Don't make a scene, Sarah. It was just a toast." But it wasn't just a toast. It was a public declaration that I wasn't enough, that I never had been. As tears threatened to spill, I excused myself to the restroom, where I splashed cold water on my face and stared at my reflection. The woman looking back at me seemed suddenly unfamiliar, smaller somehow, diminished. "No," I whispered to my reflection, "this isn't who you are." I left without returning to the table, the valet bringing my Volvo around as I waited in the frigid February air, hugging myself against more than just the cold. As I drove home through the dark, winding roads, my hands gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Tears streamed down my face, but beneath the hurt, something else was forming, a hardening resolve. That moment, I vowed she'd wish she never opened her mouth. They both would. What Jason didn't know, what no one knew except Emily, was that I wasn't just an elementary school teacher. For the past 3 years, I'd been running a side business called Petal and Page, designing custom floral arrangements for weddings and corporate events. What had started as a creative outlet during summer breaks had blossomed into a surprisingly lucrative enterprise, grossing over $100,000 the previous year alone. I'd kept it separate from my relationship with Jason, not because I was hiding it, but because it was mine, something I'd built from nothing, with my own creativity and determination. The previous spring, I'd even started scouting locations for a small storefront, dreaming of eventually leaving teaching to pursue my passion full-time. My nest egg had grown to $50,000, carefully saved and earmarked for my business expansion. Jason knew I had some savings but had no idea of the amount. He'd always been dismissive of my little flower hobby, as he called it, seeing it as cute but inconsequential. The morning after that disastrous Valentine's dinner, I called in sick to school for the first time in years. Instead of facing 30 curious third graders, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of strong coffee, creating a new email address and methodically documenting everything. Over the next few weeks, I became a detective in my own relationship. I recovered deleted texts from our shared cloud account. I found voice messages he'd failed to properly erase. Most damning were the Venmo transactions, small at first, then increasingly substantial, all to Melissa, with suggestive emojis as the only description. They totaled nearly $2,400 over just 3 months, money that should have been in our Portugal fund. By early March, I had compiled enough evidence to paint a clear picture of their affair. On March 3rd, I made an appointment with Anna Whitfield, a formidable divorce attorney recommended by a colleague whose sister had recently navigated a messy separation. "You've been remarkably thorough," Anna noted, reviewing my evidence in her sleek downtown office. "Most clients come to me with suspicions. You've brought me a case." "I'm a planner," I replied simply. "It's the teacher in me." Anna's smile was sharp. "Well, teacher, you've done your homework. Now let's talk strategy." I hadn't actually decided to divorce Jason yet. Wasn't even sure I wanted to. What I wanted was justice, or perhaps more accurately, vindication. I wanted Melissa to understand the consequences of her arrogance, and Jason to feel the weight of his betrayal. The opportunity presented itself unexpectedly through social media. Scrolling through Instagram one sleepless night, I saw Melissa had posted about her upcoming birthday celebration, a lavish brunch at Tuscany Gardens scheduled for April 28th. The post included a list of attendees, among them several of Jason's colleagues and friends I recognized. My name was conspicuously absent. "Perfect," I whispered to my empty bedroom. The weeks leading up to April 28th were a blur of preparation. I continued teaching, smiling at my students and conferencing with parents as if my personal life wasn't imploding. I fulfilled floral orders for spring weddings, my hands steady as they crafted delicate arrangements that belied the turmoil inside me. At home, Jason and I existed in a strange limbo. He'd apologized half-heartedly for the misunderstanding at Valentine's dinner, claiming I'd overreacted. I accepted his apology with equal insincerity, playing the role of the forgiving girlfriend while secretly counting down the days. I reached out to Emily, finally ready to admit she'd been right all along. "I should have listened to you," I told her over wine in her apartment, away from any chance of Jason overhearing. "I wish I'd been wrong," she said, squeezing my hand. "What are you going to do?" I showed her my plan, laid out in meticulous detail in a notebook I carried everywhere. Her eyes widened. "Sarah, this is intense. Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything," I replied, my voice steady. "Will you help me?" Emily studied me for a long moment before nodding. "What do you need?" The morning of April 28th dawned bright and clear. Spring sunshine warming the city after a long, dreary winter. I dressed with deliberate care, a cream-colored pantsuit that conveyed both elegance and authority, paired with the pearl earrings my grandmother had left me. "For strength," she'd always said. In my car trunk was a white coat, the same designer coat I'd given Melissa as a Christmas gift after Jason insisted she be included in our holiday exchange. Beside it sat a small projector, a wireless speaker, and a USB drive containing carefully edited recordings. Emily waited for me outside Tuscany Gardens, her normally cheerful face tense with concern. "Last chance to back out," she said as I approached. I shook my head. They made their choice. Now they can live with the consequences. The restaurant's garden patio had been transformed for Melissa's celebration. White roses and peonies adorned every table, while fairy lights twinkled from the pergola overhead despite the daylight hour. About 25 guests mingled in small groups, champagne flutes in hand. I spotted Jason immediately, standing close to Melissa, his hand resting possessively on the small of her back. Emily squeezed my arm once before disappearing inside with the equipment we'd smuggled past the maitre d' in oversized tote bags. My part was to create the distraction that would allow her to set everything up unnoticed. I approached the party with measured steps, the white coat draped over my arm. Several heads turned as I walked in, conversations faltering as recognition dawned. Jason saw me last, his face draining of color as our eyes met across the patio. "Sarah," he stammered, moving away from Melissa. "What are you doing here?" Melissa turned, champagne sloshing in her glass as she registered my presence. Her expression shifted from surprise to something like smug pity. "I came to wish Melissa a happy birthday," I said, my voice carrying across the suddenly quiet gathering. I held out the coat. "And to return this, it seems you've been wearing more than just my gifts." Confused murmurs rippled through the crowd. Melissa took a step forward, chin raised defiantly. "Sarah, this is embarrassing," she said, her tone patronizing. "I thought you'd moved on by now." "Moved on?" I repeated, allowing myself a small smile. "But I've only just arrived." That was Emily's cue. The garden wall behind me suddenly illuminated as the projector came to life. A moment later, Jason's voice filled the air, crystal clear thanks to the high-end speaker system we'd positioned. "She has no idea," his recorded voice said, laughter evident in his tone. "Sarah's so busy with those kids and her little flower arrangements, she probably thinks I'm actually working late." Melissa's recorded giggle followed. "You can't expect me to be loyal. I'm young, I'm hot, and I have options. But your girlfriend? She should be grateful you even come home." More recordings played in devastating succession. Intimate conversations, cruel jokes at my expense, explicit discussions of their time together in hotels I'd paid for, believing Jason was on business trips. The final blow was a video, footage from the security camera in our apartment building's elevator, showing Jason and Melissa wrapped around each other, entering our home on a night I'd been visiting my parents. By the time the presentation ended, the garden was deathly silent. Jason stood frozen, his face a mask of panic and shock. Melissa had collapsed into a chair, tears streaking her mascara. "Sarah, let's talk privately," Jason finally managed, his voice trembling as he stepped toward me. I held up a hand, stopping him. "We're done talking. Jason, I've heard enough." The guests shifted uncomfortably, some averting their eyes, others watching the drama unfold with undisguised fascination. From the corner of my eye, I noticed Melissa's Aunt Claire leaning toward another guest. "I never trusted that girl," she whispered, loud enough for many to hear. Melissa stood abruptly. "This is my birthday party," she hissed, face flushed with humiliation. "You can't just crash it and—" "Actually, I can," I interrupted calmly, "since I paid for it." Another wave of whispers swept through the crowd. This was the piece de resistance, the final twist I'd arranged weeks earlier, after discovering their affair. I'd contacted the restaurant and transferred the entire reservation to my name, paying the substantial deposit Melissa had been putting off. "The manager can confirm that," I added, gesturing toward the concerned-looking man hovering at the patio entrance. "In fact, I believe the final payment is due today." I turned to address the stunned guests. "Please, enjoy the celebration. The food and champagne are excellent. I selected them myself. Consider it my parting gift." With that, I walked away, Emily falling into step beside me as we exited through the restaurant. Behind us, chaos erupted, raised voices, breaking glass, the distinct sound of Melissa's sobs. "Holy shit, Sarah," Emily breathed as we reached my car. "That was necessary," I finished for her, hands shaking slightly as I unlocked the doors. Only now, with the adrenaline fading, did I feel the full weight of what I'd just done. The aftermath was swift and far-reaching. By that evening, videos of the confrontation had spread throughout Jason's social circle. Someone, I never discovered who, had recorded portions of my presentation and shared them widely. Melissa's carefully curated social media presence imploded overnight. Her Instagram, once boasting over 50,000 followers thanks to her fashion influencer aspirations, hemorrhaged supporters as the scandal spread. Within a week, she'd lost nearly half her following, with sponsors quickly distancing themselves from the controversy. For Jason, the consequences were equally severe. Meridian Solutions prided itself on its progressive, family-friendly culture. The HR department placed him on immediate administrative leave pending an investigation into potential violations of the company code of conduct, particularly regarding his relationship with a junior team member. I didn't stick around to witness their downfall firsthand. The morning after the birthday party revelation, I called my parents. "I need you," was all I said, my voice finally breaking. They arrived on my doorstep the following afternoon. Having driven straight through from their home in Connecticut, my mother took one look at my face and enveloped me in a hug that smelled of her familiar perfume and home. "Tell us everything," my father said as we sat in my living room, his voice gentle but resolute. So I did. I told them about the affair, the gaslighting, the financial deceptions. I showed them the evidence I'd gathered and explained what I'd done at the birthday party. By the time I finished, dusk had settled over the city, casting long shadows across the floor. My mother wiped tears from her eyes. "I'm so sorry we didn't see through him." "I didn't either," I admitted. "Not for a long time." My father, who had remained mostly silent throughout my story, finally spoke. "What do you need from us, Sarah?" I took a deep breath. "Help me pack. I can't stay here." For the next 2 weeks, I lived with Emily, taking a leave of absence from school to sort through the wreckage of my life. Jason called incessantly at first, his messages evolving from anger to pleading as the consequences of his actions became clear. I blocked his number after the 3rd day. Surprisingly, it was my floral business that became my sanctuary. With my teaching responsibilities temporarily suspended, I threw myself into Petal and Page, working 14-hour days to fulfill existing orders and pitch to new clients. Word of what happened spread through Boston's tight-knit business community, but rather than hindering me, it seemed to generate interest. People reached out, curious about the woman behind the scandal, and stayed for my designs. By mid-May, I'd signed contracts with 3 new corporate clients, including a prestigious hotel chain that wanted weekly arrangements for their properties throughout New England. "This is becoming more than a side gig," Emily observed one evening as she helped me prepare centerpieces for a charity auction. I looked around at my makeshift workshop that had taken over her dining room. "I think it always was," I replied. "I just didn't let myself see it." By summer, I had secured a small storefront in a trendy area of Beacon Hill. The space needed work. The previous tenant had been a vintage clothing store with questionable taste in wall colors, but it had character and excellent foot traffic. Most importantly, it was mine. On the day I signed the lease, I finally met with Jason face to face. He'd requested the meeting through Anna Whitfield, who had officially become my divorce attorney. We met at a neutral location, a coffee shop near the courthouse where our divorce proceedings would eventually take place. Jason looked different, thinner, with dark circles under his eyes. His usual confident demeanor had been replaced by a nervous energy that manifested in constantly fidgeting hands. "Thank you for meeting me," he began, voice subdued. I said nothing, simply waiting. "I lost my job," he continued after an uncomfortable silence. "The company asked me to resign last week." "I'm sorry to hear that," I replied, not feeling sorry at all. He ran a hand through his hair, which needed a cut. "Melissa's gone too, transferred to the Chicago office. We're no longer seeing each other." I took a sip of my coffee. "Is there a reason you wanted to tell me this in person?" "I thought you'd want to know that you won," he said, a flash of the old bitterness surfacing. "Isn't that what this was all about?" "This wasn't a competition, Jason," I said quietly. "It was a consequence. There's a difference." "My life is in ruins," he insisted. "I can't get a job in this city. My reputation is destroyed. Was that really necessary?" I studied him for a moment, searching for any sign of genuine remorse rather than self-pity. finding none. I gathered my purse and stood. "You know what I keep thinking about?" I said. "That night at the Willowbrook estate, you humiliated me in front of a room full of strangers and then told me not to make a scene. You never once considered how your actions affected me." I leaned closer, lowering my voice. "So no, I don't think I won anything, but I'm no longer losing either." I left him sitting there, shoulders slumped, and walked out into the summer sunshine feeling lighter than I had in months. The divorce was finalized in September, remarkably straightforward given the evidence I'd compiled. Jason didn't contest the division of assets I proposed, which left me with full ownership of my business and savings. He kept the apartment we'd shared, now worth considerably less to me than the fresh start I craved. As fall painted Boston in rich reds and golds, Petal & Page officially opened its doors. My parents drove up for the grand opening, my father beaming with pride as he snapped photos of me cutting the ribbon. Emily stood nearby, alongside several colleagues from school who had become loyal supporters. "To new beginnings," my mother toasted at the small reception inside, raising a glass of champagne that sparkled in the afternoon light streaming through the shop's bay windows. "And to knowing your worth," Emily added, giving me a meaningful look. Business thrived beyond my most optimistic projections. By Christmas, I'd hired 2 part-time assistants to help with orders and deliveries. My revenue had nearly doubled compared to the previous year, allowing me to make the difficult but exciting decision to resign from teaching at the end of the school year. On my last day at Oak Ridge Elementary, my students presented me with a handmade book of drawings and messages. "We're sad you're leaving, Ms. Mitchell," one little girl said, "but happy you're following your dream." Out of that chapter's ending bloomed an unexpected beginning. Through a business networking event, I met Mark Anderson, a forensic accountant whose firm had recently moved to Boston from Chicago. He came into my shop the week after we met, ordering an arrangement for his mother's birthday. "These are beautiful," he said, gesturing to the display cooler filled with my latest creations. "You're very talented." Unlike Jason's polished charm, Mark's appeal was in his authenticity, a quiet confidence that didn't need to announce itself. He asked thoughtful questions about my designs, listening intently to my answers without checking his phone once. When he asked me to dinner, I hesitated only briefly before accepting. Our first date stretched from drinks to dinner to a midnight walk along the harbor, conversation flowing effortlessly between us. "I know about what happened," he admitted as we stood watching the moonlight reflect off the water. "It made the rounds in business circles." I tensed slightly. And I think you showed remarkable courage," he said simply. "It couldn't have been easy." We took things slowly, both carrying lessons from past relationships. Mark had been divorced for 3 years, his ex-wife having chosen her career over their marriage, moving to London while he stayed to care for his aging parents. He understood loss and rebuilding in ways Jason never could. By the following spring, nearly a year after the Tuscany Gardens showdown, my life had transformed completely. Petal & Page had expanded to include wedding planning services. Our calendar booked solid through the summer season. I'd moved into a charming condo in Tremont Street, the deed bearing only my name, a point of particular pride. Mark and I had grown closer, our relationship deepening into something solid and nurturing. Unlike Jason, he celebrated my success rather than being threatened by it, often bringing dinner to the shop during my late nights preparing for events. One March evening, as we walked back to my condo after dinner, we passed the Willowbrook estate. I hadn't returned since that fateful Valentine's Day, the memory still carrying an echo of pain despite everything that had changed. Mark noticed my slight hesitation. "Bad memories?" I nodded, then surprised myself by saying, "Let's go in for a drink." The interior was as elegant as I remembered, though it seemed smaller somehow, less intimidating. We sat at the bar, ordering whiskeys that we sipped slowly. "I brought someone here once," I told Mark, who knew pieces of my history but not all the details. "He humiliated me in that dining room over there." Mark's expression darkened. "I'm sorry that happened to you." "I'm not," I said, realizing as the words left my mouth that they were true. Not anymore. If it hadn't, I might still be with him, still believing I was lucky to have someone who treated me as an afterthought. Mark took my hand, his touch warm and reassuring. His loss. My gain, I corrected, raising my glass, to the unexpected gifts of betrayal. As we clinked glasses, I caught my reflection in the mirror behind the bar, confident, serene, whole. The woman looking back at me was no longer diminished but expanded, strengthened by the very things meant to break her. Later that night, lying in bed beside Mark, I thought about Melissa's words that had once cut so deeply. You can't expect me to be loyal. I'm young, I'm hot, and I have options. She had been right about one thing. We all have options. I had chosen to reclaim my power, to build something meaningful from the ruins of betrayal, to transform pain into purpose. Some might call what I did revenge. I prefer to think of it as restoration, the restoration of truth, of justice, and most importantly, of myself.